Hello and welcome to Frameline 45. I am Allegra Madsen, the program director here at Frameline, and I am incredibly excited that you have joined us for our Frameline Talk series. Today we will be talking with TJ Parcell, the director of the documentary featured in Frameline 45, Invisible, and two instrumental subjects from the film, Shelley Wright and Bonnie Baker. And today we'll hear the story of how they came to be involved with the project and what kept everybody going. Right. Thank you, TJ. I'd like to hand it off to you.
Okay, well, thank you, Allegra, and what a pleasure it is to be part of Frameline 45. I am thrilled to be on this call with Shelley and Bonnie because both of these women have a very special place in my heart, and they always will, because they've contributed so powerfully to our film. A friend of mine, Bill Brim, came to me with the idea for Invisible. He took me out to coffee and he says, TJ, gay women, country music. And I was immediately struck by the idea. I thought, wow, now here's two things that don't go together. And it was just one of those ideas that was just perfect. And 3 weeks later, we were sitting down interviewing Mary Gauthier. Because as soon as Mary heard about it, she says, I'm in. And she sat down and we did an interview. And then I think the next one was Kai Fleming. Kai Fleming says, Mary did it, I'll do it. And then Jess Leary says, oh, Mary and Kai did it, I'll do it. And then Bonnie said, oh, Jess, Kai, and Mary did it, I'm in. And it just took off from there. And I'm going to get back to Bonnie in a moment because her journey in and out of the film was quite interesting and worth talking about and exploring here. But Shelley Wright is probably one of the biggest celebrities we have in our film. She was one of the biggest artists. Shelley was part of Frameline 35 with her own coming out story, her own documentary, Wish Me Away, which I think won Frameline and it won like another dozen film festivals. And she had a book that came out, Like Me, at the same time. And I felt from the very beginning that we could not tell this story without Shelley Wright, because she really was our hero. And it took a while to get Shelley on board. And some of it was, I think she might have Googled me and says, who the hell is this guy? And no, it wasn't that. Okay, that's good to know. But I think that from my perspective, I felt like we couldn't tell this story without Shelley. There's not a single woman in our film that did not talk about Shelley Wright and the impact that she had on them personally and the impact she had on our community. But I think my feeling was that perhaps Shelley was a bit bruised because Nashville was not very kind to her. And we get into that in the film, but I had to be very patient and persistent. And Bonnie was a friend of Shelley, so I think we used Bonnie, and Mary Gauthier was a friend of Shelley's, and we used Mary. And so I would love to talk with you, Shelley, a little bit about what it was like on your side, what was going on with you, and then.
Yeah. TJ, first of all, thank you for your kind and generous words. Bonnie, it's an honor to stand with you in this chapter of storytelling. I'm just really glad to be on the panel today. TJ, I think I wish that history would record that you had asked me and I said, sure, I'll do it. But your sensibilities and kind of your characterization of it taking me a while and kind of what that looked like is pretty right. It wasn't that I had a fear that it wouldn't be, that the film wouldn't be great or important. But, since coming out 11 years ago, I've told my story in a lot of different settings, and I've gotten to a place to where I get to be mindful of how I use my voice and with whom I align myself. And And so all I really needed to know from you, TJ, is what you just very naturally and instinctively made me understand, which was that you would have a tender care with the truth of the women being profiled in the film, that you'd done an incredible amount of work to understand kind of the essence of a woman in this kind of historically male-dominated, straight industry. We've existed for a long time, we queer people, and especially we lesbians. There's something about, you know, I believe that gay women are, we're just born strategic. We hit the ground running and we're strategic from the get-go, which means if we put our head towards songwriting, you know, we buckle down, we do the work, we find a way to do it. Like Bonnie does, she's a great producer and songwriter. I would venture to guess, if you were to ask Bonnie, I don't want to speak for her, but I would venture to guess that she's probably made a direct line between her ambition, her tenacity, her efficacy in her work to being a lesbian that was closeted for a long time. So once, TJ, I understood that you had done that work and that you really were teeing up what would be a really powerful story. And then, of course, I was really honored that it was your belief that the story would not be as well told if I didn't in some tiny way weigh in. So it wasn't that I was trying to be cagey or difficult, but I just needed to know that this film was going to be what it ended up being, which is a quite powerful, important story.
Well, I think the you add so much to it. We have 12 women and one trans man in this story, and they run a gamut of experiences. Some chose to not be out and paid a price for it, and others, I think, as Mary Gaucher says, there was no closet big enough for this. And I think when Bill came to me with the idea, one of the first things that came to my mind was that I spent 20 years in software in the 80s and 90s, and it was a very different time. And my job was selling to middle-aged white guys who lived in the suburbs. And my job was to build relationships, and talking about my boyfriend was not going to build relationships. So for me, it was a business decision. But I paid a price for it. I knew the cost, and I could not imagine a more repressive industry than country music. Both the industry itself, Nashville, the South, the audience. So I of questions I wanted to know, with just a teeny bit of empathy that similar but doesn't compare. And then your story of what you went through. Can you talk about that a little bit? Just set the stage for what brought you to tell your story.
Yeah, and I want to kind of go back. And by the way, your empathy is on full display. Anyone who is in a room with you or in a virtual room with you can feel it. And it's really valuable. And it's why you're really good at what you do. So
Thank you.
So, yeah, you mentioned earlier that Nashville wasn't so good to me when I came out. There's a lot of variance in that. Not being very good to me. There was some backlash, obviously, but the bulk of what was so confounding to me about my industry is just the kind of how quiet they got, So it wasn't that I got a letter from Music Rose saying, "You're not welcome back here. Don't come back." It wasn't that at all. It was just that everyone just was like, "Oh, Shelley who? We never heard of her. I don't know. She wasn't that big, or this isn't that big a deal," or, and in fact, it was a big deal. In fact, it was, there's a reason why women like me hide, in our industry. And, when you were talking about kind of the male driven industry, kind of straight industry, keep in mind that it's very well known among all of us gals who come to Nashville that for every 20 men that get signed to a publishing deal or a, recording contract, there's maybe one woman that gets a contract. So we were all vying. There's that kind of scarcity mentality. We were all kind of vying for one space. So when you come into the game and you're a female, you don't have the anatomy that will get you at the front of the line, but then you're also a closeted queer person. It's pretty arduous path, and many have walked it. Many before me walked it. There were many women who left their careers in country music because they just couldn't kind of reconcile all of those pieces of themselves. And I was young and dumb and just thought, oh, I can do this. I can have success, and I can be a pinup girl. I can be a video star and tour and make records and write songs and be on TV and on the radio. And I can manage this, secret. But when you're cutting deals like that, early on in your life, like, oh, I can hide that. You just don't know the value of what love and companionship and authenticity will be to you as you grow into your, grown-up self. So, the long and the short of it, TJ, is that I crashed and burned. I nearly ended my life in my East Nashville home over there on the cool side of town on a really cold winter's day. And I had a 9mm gun that my parents had bought for me for my safety in my mouth, ready to pull the trigger. Not because I'm gay, but because I was just done. I had been lying about who I was for so long. My relationship with the woman I loved for 12 years that was totally in the closet, that had fallen apart. No surprise there. And I didn't know there was no representation. I didn't know how to be an openly gay woman with a faith practice who sings country music, who sings on the Opry, who supports the troops, who likes to wear heels and makeup. It was just like, there's no path forward. So I nearly ended my life. And, by the grace of God and some other good stuff going on, I didn't. And the morning after I didn't is when I knew, no, shit, you have to come out. Not only do you have to come out, but you have to come out well. I didn't want to just go to MySpace and say, hey, y'all, I'm gay. I needed to tell the whole story. And that was, I got a lot of backlash from Nashville for that. Well, we don't like how she came out. We don't like that she did it this way. We don't like that she did TV around it. It was too orchestrated. It was too strategic. My mind, and I wouldn't change a single moment of it, because the people who tell untruths about people like me, they're very strategic about it. And so I if anything, I am strategic, and I deployed every sensibility I had about how to tell a story, how to start from the beginning and end and tell a narrative. And so that's why I wrote my book. That's why I allowed Wish Me Away to be made about my coming out. And so, Nashville's changed quite a bit, which is awesome. And I feel a part of that change. And I take part of that as, that's every time someone comes out in country music and they're celebrated and the tweets roll in of support. And I love it, because that's that tidal wave. I'm in there. I'm a drop in that ocean.
Thank you. Bonnie sat for the interview right on the heels of the Women's March. And you want to talk about that a little bit, Bonnie? Because you were like in it all the way. You were ready to go.
I just first want to say to Shelly and to TJ both, thank you for just being the collective army that I feel around me on a daily basis, because it takes all of us. The word that Shelly used, quiet, I lived my life, and I stayed very quiet. I didn't want to make trouble because I didn't want people to notice me. I wrote story songs that, were out in the world about other people's lives. And there came a point in my life where I just didn't want to tell other people's stories anymore. I wanted to tell my own. And the reason Shelley is such an important part of these stories for me is because the bravery that it took and the forethought and the strategic planning. Part of the reason I wanted to trust you and Bill Brim, which I knew Bill more than you, is because our stories have been distorted so many times, and I've put my trust in the wrong people so many times that to trust someone else to tell my story was a little bit out of my comfort zone. So the Women's March happened. Things in our country, were moving at a pace that felt unreal. My town that I love more than anything is really two towns. We have Nashville that celebrates my life, and then we have a Nashville that will tell racist, misogynistic jokes kind of in the hallway with a cup of coffee, and they'll wink at it. So we have two towns that we live in. So I went into the first interview with TJ, and we started talking about the uncovering of who I am as a human being. And I literally had to stop the interview and tell TJ, I can't do this. I'm not ready. So we stopped the interview. You and Bill were very sweet because you had set up all your stuff at my office and we were talking, and I had to close it down. I could feel a crack happening. And I reached out to some friends, actually had to go to my attorney's a little gathering, and a friend of mine, I saw her and she just looked at me and she was like, something's not right. And I said, I need a therapist right now. She took a pen and wrote on my hand. She said, call her. She is a great childhood trauma therapist. I didn't know that that's what I needed, but that's the name that was on my hand when I got home. And like Shelley, I have dealt with depression my whole entire life. And there are moments it gets really out of control and off the rails. And then there are moments I can manage and navigate. In that moment, I was not doing well, and I knew I wasn't. And, I quit drinking. I've quit all these things, like trying to keep everything in the rails. And for the first time, I decided I'm going to go to a therapist and I'm going to talk about childhood. And so for 2018, I went to a therapist and I sat and talked about all of the things in my life as a preacher's kid in a small town, as a white kid in a Black neighborhood, people that were racist and misogynistic, and I didn't know what that was called. I just knew it was mean. To always trying to keep my mouth so quiet, keep myself so in the corner and in the closet and quiet so that I wouldn't be in trouble. And I realized I had brought those same patterns and behaviors to Nashville to be a songwriter. I was just trying to be as small as possible. So 2018 was therapy, and then TJ and I reconnected later in 2019, and I was able to sit down and have the conversation and just be a little more balanced and healthy. My sobriety has survived. My depression is easier today than it's ever been. My feeling underwater has gone away a little bit. And so I've said before, this film really was a mark for me in my life. And I mean that sincerely. And you know, Shelley Wright has always been someone in front of me that took some of the bullets that allowed me to heal enough to then be able to stand beside her today and talk about these things. Because, I mean, that quiet battle that we fight, that's the hardest battle you'll ever fight, because you feel alone, you feel powerless, you feel like you have nowhere to go except inward. And my inward wasn't healthy. So for that, TJ, for that, Shelley, thank you guys. I really appreciate the journey that this film has been for me.
Yeah, if I can share for a minute, Bonnie, my experience, my side of working with you over the course of the film. You gave us that amazing interview, and I remember you left there and you had this burst of creativity where you wrote some deeply personal songs, and you shared with me Dry County, the early draft of it. And I remember from the very first chord, I kind of sat back and said, whoa, this was a very deeply personal song. And I wanted to film the progression of the development of that song. And Bonnie was reluctant, but was willing to go along with it. Mm-hmm. And we had a crew come to town, and we were going to go into the studio, and she had you remember you had a vocalist that was also a preacher's child. And but the night before, about midnight, Bonnie called me up freaking out. She was like, I can't do it. I can't. And I was like, and I got right away the anxiety, and I said, it's okay, Bonnie. It's okay. Take a breath. We'll get you next time, the next production period. It's okay. We'll take it off the production schedule for this week. And then I think the next time around is when you dropped out of the program. You dropped out of the film. You were just, and it was clear what you were going through. And, you know, it's the community around this film. Like, you know, Kai was, you know, in there with us, with you, and everybody was saying, just give Bonnie time. Just have to be patient. Let her go through this. Let's hope, you know, you come back around. And so it was 2019 when I got the email from you, and you were doing some event for young artists that you were promoting. And Bill and I came to see you. And I don't know how I can tell this story myself without crying, because it was really such a powerful experience. We went up to thank you for inviting us and for the show. And just as we were leaving, Bonnie says, TJ, I finished Dry County. And I went out to my car and I cried. And then the next day I wanted to call you. And Kai Fleming and Bill were like, no, wait for Bonnie to call you. And then we did. We finally we shot your performing that song in the studio that's the church.
Yeah.
I can't think of the name of it, but Ocean Way. Thank you, Ocean Way. But that was such a powerful moment in the film. And I don't want to. I want to plug this for you while we're here. Bonnie is releasing that song Dry County the very weekend that Frameline that Invisible is premiering at Frameline, and it is one of the most powerful songs I've ever heard. And you are just so brave to have had the privilege to witness your process, and your bravery through that was just extraordinary.
And I want to put in here, for those of you, Kai Fleming is really kind of a godmother to most of us. She will sit across from me for 4 hours having coffee and talking about life and all those things. So we need to, Jess Leary, Kai Fleming, Virginia team, Pam Rose, Marion Kennedy, Diane Davidson. Like I'm floundering here, but the people in this movie are truly the guts of Nashville. They really are just the whole frame of what this city and what this town is about as songwriters. You know, we're in a different category than artists and players and engineers. The songwriters usually sit in a space like this by ourselves writing songs. And so that's what I love about the film is Chely Wright is known as an artist, but Chely Wright's heart is also very much a songwriter, is very much a storyteller. And, you know, from the days that we knew each other, that's where your heart was, right? And it felt like this film was able to kind of show that for you, you know?
Yeah. Thank you, Bonnie. And yes, that is, you know, that was from a very young age. My goal was to figure out how do I get to do what Loretta Lynn does. She makes
Right.
up her own songs and sings them and people show up. And I, you know, when I moved to Nashville, I was 18. And a few years later, I was actually signed as a songwriter before I got my record deal. But then, you know, the machine moves quickly. You gotta find all the great songs you can, whether you wrote them or not. And Nashville is like the preeminent, you know, the home base of songwriting worldwide, if you ask me. So, you know, I tried to be wise enough to not get in my own way and record whatever great songs I could find. And, you know, you mentioned Jess and Pam and Kai. You know, I forgot what year it was, TJ, but it was before the pandemic, obviously. But I was I live in New York, but I was back in Nashville working on one of my rental houses, and I ran over to Calypso in East Nashville to have some beans. And I'm sitting there, and I hear two people kind of two tables away, one level down, talking, and I look over and I'm like, that's TJ. He was in my apartment in New York. I know that was TJ, and I recognized his voice. And then I heard Kai speaking, and of course I've met Kai over the years, and they were talking about the film, and they were talking about some hesitation Kai had about something that this was kind of her coming out as well. And so I picked up my backpack and I walked over and I said, may I sit down? And they were like, we were just talking about you. And I said, I know, I heard. So I sat down, and I don't know how long we stayed there, TJ, a couple of hours. And then Kai and I rode around for the next couple of hours talking. And she said, why did we never connect back in the day? And I said, well, first of all, I have to say something. I knew who you were. I mean, everyone knew who Kai was. But I also knew that she was known to be one of those people. I also knew she was probably gay. It was talked about behind her back. She was obviously not publicly out, but that was the whisper. And I heard publishers and record label people say, well, it's a shame those girls are gay. They're so talented. It's a shame. Like they could have been somebody had they not been gay.
Right.
And so I told Kai, I said, I knew who you were. And like knowing they were out there kind of comforted me and tortured me in equal measure. And I made friends with a lot of songwriters in town. And I regret that I naturally would have been attracted as a person and a co-writer to Kai. I mean, she wrote Smoky Mountain Rain. I mean, my God, which was, you know, Ronnie Millsap's one of my favorite artists of all time. The reason I never actioned any conversation or friendship or co-writing with those women is because I was afraid of who I was. And
because we were really, I was encouraged by every publisher, like, go hang out with the guys. Or, you know, they didn't want me to hang out with other women because then people would then think the people hanging out with me were gay.
Right.
So
and Bonnie, and they just didn't, a pack of women seldom got much done in Nashville. So people were continually trying to get we women to attach ourselves to the hot male artist, or the hot male producer. So huddling among women, to use my friend Brooke Baldwin's term about women kind of unlocking their collective power, huddling was not recommended. But I was so, I guess it felt so healing for me to get to, number one, tell Kai what her body of work had meant to me.
Right.
Number two, tell her I knew she was there the whole time, and it actually helped me when I decided to come out. I knew I wasn't alone. I may have been, one of the first to actually shout it from the hilltops that I'm queer, but knowing she was there and that there was a small community of queer women was incredible. But I'm so disappointed that I missed out on 30 years of friendship with these women. I know I know we could have done great work together. And yeah, it's a byproduct of being in the closet. Nothing good comes from it.
Right.
Well, it's not too late, Shelley. It's never too late.
We've talked about it. We're texting.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, I'll tell you that Bill and I both, from the very first interview with Mary Gaucher, we were probably 10 or 15 minutes into it, and both of us kind of just sat back and we were like, whoa. We were just blown away by the vulnerability and the courage that each and every one of you shared in our project. We were very humbled by it. And I think that it's just our job became really clear. It was like, just create the safe space, and you all occupied it. And, I went to film school at 50. My thing is, I use film as a vehicle for change. It's my way of trying to change hearts and minds and make the world a better place. And I am in such awe of each and every one of you. The courage and the depths to which you mine to make this world, this industry, this place easier for the next generation. When we were waiting to come on here, they had Katie Pruitt's song on, Loving Her. And I was tearing up before we got started, because here's a young artist who, we have a woman in our film, Diane Davidson, who had 4 albums by the time she was 21. And her 4th album was a lesbian love song, and that ended her career. And now young Katie Pruitt, that song, Loving Her, which is about her lover, is what's launching her career. And I think that the things are changing, and they're changing because of the bravery and the courage and the vulnerability that you all are willing to share. And it's been just the honor of my life to have gotten to know you over the last 4 years. And I look forward to the community we've built. So thank you.
TJ, you're just the sweetest guy. We stand on the shoulders of many who went before us that their names will never be known. They too packed up a guitar and got in a beater car and drove from the Midwest or Fresno or Spokane, and they showed up on Music Row just like we did. And they didn't make it. Either they were suffocating by hiding who they were, or somebody found out who they thought they might be and they didn't get a shot. And there are other successful women in our industry who had hit records that never came out. We stand on their shoulders. Everyone, we're a mosaic, and everyone kind of puts their little piece of glass on the table. And it's so great to be part of such a big, beautiful work of art that is queer women in songwriting. I couldn't be more honored to be part of this film and part of the community.
Ditto to what she said.
I'm sorry, Bonnie, please.
She says it better than I will ever say it. So
now that's a lie, Bonnie Baker.
Anyway, absolutely what Shelley said. This film is going to do so much for just to see it coming out on June 26th is such an honor. I've been scared to death, sleepless nights. I go right back to what if people don't like it? What if they don't like it?
Bonnie,
okay.
I don't think.
Bonnie, the Bishop Gene Robinson, the first openly gay Episcopalian priest, was one of my mentors before I came out. So I had a really cool team of people to help kind of keep me ready and get me ready and make sure I knew what I was talking about and kind of help me steel myself. And the bishop and I were downtown in Lower Manhattan. It was I think 2008, and we're having a bagel. And I said, Bishop, what if people aren't okay with it? What if what if they don't like me? What if they reject me? And he's smearing the cream cheese on, and he said, oh, I'm going to tell you something's really going to help you out a lot. You ready? And I said, yes. And he said, it's nobody's business. It's none of your business what other people think of you.
Right. I
And then he
love
took a
that.
bite out of the bagel. I'm
Yeah.
like,
He had
oh.
his bagel and his schmear, and he goes,
Yeah.
you know, yeah.
But
I
I
love that.
think of that so often. And
Yeah.
and yeah, we are hardwired. We're emotional critters. We're songwriters. We do, our job is to get people to be a fan of what we do so we can
To like
continue
it,
to
yeah.
do it. But at the end of the day, I've just taken great, solace in a couple of things. Yeah, it doesn't matter what they think of me. Number two, you can't take away someone's courage. I don't need someone else to say I'm brave. I know how much courage
Right.
it took me to do what I did.
Right.
You can't deny that, Bonnie Baker has written hit #1 songs. No matter what happens at the end of the day, a #1 hit Grammy, she's a total baller. They can't deny you that, and you're where you are in history, and that you came out of the closet. Some will say, well, she wasn't that big. She didn't have enough hit songs. She hadn't won Songwriter of the Year,
Right.
so it's not that big of a deal. They
Right.
can't take that from you. It's
Right.
none of your business what they think of you.
It's none of my business. I'm with you. Thank you. It's been such a great conversation, TJ. Thank you for having us here.
And the last thing I'll say, my parting note is that we did a test screening of the film before we picture locked on Olivia cruise. I forget how many women were on the cruise, but they loved it, and they loved it, and it wasn't even locked yet. So, but I'll tell you, for me, it's just this whole experience over the last 4 years, among all the gifts I've gotten from it, is that I don't know what I did, and I so shortchanged my life without having with having less lesbians in it.
You did.
It's just, I did. It's like maybe it's the age I grew up in. The boys went over here, the girls went over there, and
we've got some making up to do, TJ.
Yes,
Yeah,
we do.
TJ, thank you for a
Yeah.
beautiful film and for your heart in storytelling and just the care that you took with these incredible women's courageous, art-filled lives. This is a beautiful film, and I'm well done to you and your team.
Yes.
Well, thank you so
agreed.
much. Thank you both. I love you both.
Thank you, Frameline.
Love you guys.
Still
Thank
wear
you.
my
Thank you,
Frameline
Frontline.
t-shirt almost every night. It's my favorite.
Yeah.
t-shirt.